Welcome back to Light the Fuse. And this week, Charles, we're taking it back, but we are uncovering a part of Mission Impossible that few people have heard about, have seen. Do you want to talk a little bit about what today's episode is?
Yeah, it's we did a very deep rundown of what was in Oliver Stone's, or at least one of the drafts of Oliver Stone's Mission Impossible 2, and I went and did this deep dive at at one of the libraries at USC on campus there. There was a special archive that you have to ask for permission to view, and I went and got to go through these boxes that were in Ronald Moore's archive there. And so, there's a lot here. Not only is there stuff about Oliver Stone's Mission Impossible 2, there's also some little snippets about like some things that didn't make it into the first movie, like David Koepp, which he talked about in our interview with him, had a whole heist sequence where they break Luther out of a jail, and that's also in here. We talk about that. So it's a lot more than just Oliver Stone's MI2, but mainly we talk about what Oliver Stone's MI2 could have or would have been, and it is bonkers.
Yeah, and what's funny is we talked to Ron Moore, who was absolutely wonderful and a great interview, and I encourage everybody to listen to that as well. But he had very little recollection of this draft or it being in his archives at USC, but
because they basically took nothing from it and started from scratch on MI2.
I think that's a really interesting circuitous way of getting to this draft, and I just love that. It's just kind of, you uncovered this amazing gem, and then we got to go through it on the show, and I think people will love to revisit it. It's really fascinating. And so many of the unmade Mission Impossible movies are kind of shrouded in secrecy or mystery, and we got to the bottom of one of them. Hey, we're working through them.
Yeah,
so
we lifted that shroud.
Yes, we did. But before we get into it, Charles, I got to give my shout-outs, obviously. First off, I want to thank Jeremy Dillon and his podcast, My Favorite Album, where he talks to a different musician, songwriter, filmmaker about the music they love and how it's influenced them and their work. Also, John B., who's been with the show for so long, and we really appreciate his support. And Elvis Ripley, the man of mystery, who, like the Unmade Mission Impossible 2, we're going to reveal a little bit more about him. He's a cinematographer who owes his whole career to Mission Impossible. He was profoundly influenced by Rogue Nation, and he says that movies are a kind of chaos, and being ready for that is the best way to prepare. So I love that kind of Mission Impossible ethos that he goes into his work with.
Yeah.
So we want to thank everybody. And if you want to be a sponsor of the show, check out our Patreon at patreon.com/LightTheFuse and sign up for the highest level. And we'll tell you more about Patreon at the back half of the show. But let's get into it. What do you say, Charles?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. But today is a really interesting episode, something that nobody has really talked about yet, as far as we know, which is the David Marconi version of Mission Impossible 2 that we believe was intended for Oliver Stone to direct. Correct?
Yes, it was. Okay. We talked about this a bit in the Making of MI2 episode, and we'll do a little bit of a recap right now. On February 24th, 1997, in Variety, Tom Cruise and Paula Wagner were trying to get Oliver Stone to write and direct the next Mission Impossible movie. And then 2 months later, they have found a concept they were happy with, and Oliver Stone protege, David Marconi, was writing the script under Stone's supervision. So then, and David Marconi, he went on to write Enemy of the State for Tony Scott, and he did The Foreigner recently, which I think I've plugged already in this show, that I think is a really good movie that Martin Campbell directed with Jackie Chan and Pierce Brosnan. And then October 97 in Variety, Michael Tolkin, who wrote Robert Altman's The Player, he was hired to rewrite David Marconi's draft. And so this draft that I read the draft of this script. It was in the Ron Moore collection at the USC Cinematic Arts Library. And this draft was from January 22nd, 1998. It's by David Marconi with revisions by Michael Tolkin. And it's a full script for the most part, but has sections of it that kind of go into outline form.
Okay.
It goes into like, it'll be like, oh, the next few scenes are going to be this, and then it goes back into script form for a while, and then it says, oh, the next few scenes are going to be this. So like, and then it was clear they still had some things to figure out.
Right.
But this is the point when we did our making of MI2, we said we weren't really sure what happened, why Oliver Stone left. But if you look at the dates of this, Ron Moore and his notes, in the Ron Moore collection at this library, you can see he starts to take notes in late January on the script. So what it seems like is this draft from January 22nd, 1998 was rejected for whatever reason.
Right.
So either Cruise or Oliver Stone or both just couldn't come, they didn't like it or something, but they decided to not go with this draft.
Okay.
And at that point Oliver Stone left.
Right.
So this was seemingly Oliver Stone's script. Either Michael Tolkin was brought in by both of them or just by Cruise to do the rewrite on Marconi's script.
Right.
But Stone left after this because then, I think a week after this is when Cruise was meeting with Wong Kar-wai. And then just, I think a few days after that, then he was meeting with John Woo. And then John Woo got hired. So this was the shift. This was the end of the Oliver Stone version. So to be fair, we're calling this Oliver Stone's Mission Impossible 2. It might not be entirely.
Right.
Because the earlier draft might have been more entirely Oliver Stone's.
But this was...
But he was still on it at this point.
Right, and the screenplay for Mission Impossible 2 credits Ron Moore...
As story. Yeah, Ron Moore and Brandon Braga.
Right.
And Robert Towne for script.
Right.
And in these Ron Moore notes, he's taking notes, and it's interesting because he's in late January, I think, and into the spring of 98, he's taking notes from Cruise, and he's writing that. He says, notes from Tom Cruise. He takes notes from Paula Wagner. He takes notes from Robert Towne.
Oh, wow.
So I don't know if Robert Towne was there as a producer at that point or what. But it's interesting. So that was after this draft that we're going to talk about mostly today.
But it's interesting. But you will all find out in mere moments that there are elements of this script that made it all the way into the Robert Towne version and into the movie that we all know as being Mission Impossible 2. So,
but as we'll talk about, you'll see this was a wildly different MI2 that never was, and we're about to tell you all about.
So you went to the Ron Moore collection at the USC Cinematic Arts Library.
Yes, I pulled this. I made a request. I think as a USC alum, you're allowed to do this.
Okay.
And so I made a request to view the Ron Moore collection, and I asked he's got all kinds of, because he's written Star Trek movies and shows, and he's got a whole giant collection of stuff that you can retrieve. But I had to request specifically box 46, folders 1 through 10, and box 66, folder 2. And that has all of his notes. And then I think when he was doing his draft with Brandon Braga, which he had several drafts in there that he had written.
Okay.
And this is in the spring of 98.
We haven't looked at those yet.
I skimmed those.
Okay.
They were pretty similar to what the final MI2 ended up being.
Oh, interesting.
So, which is why they get story credit.
Okay.
And yeah, so it seems like he came on to really change, he and Brandon Braga came on to really change the direction of MI2. And so, but he had the draft, because obviously they had him look at the draft that was like, okay, I assume Cruise and Wagner were like, this is the draft that we had, but it wasn't working. We want to move in a new direction. And he has that draft there in this collection, and that's how I was able to read it. And I don't know if we want to refresh everybody on the Oliver Stone quotes on what he thought of everything. I mean, Oliver Stone's approach to MI2, if you want to say the one from the New York Times in September of 97.
So in September of 97, he said that it will be a vehicle to say something about the state of corporate culture and technology and global politics in the 21st century. It's a big commercial picture, and Tom Cruise is a movie star, and in a sense, that gives me some camouflage. I can't always be out there leading with my chin. This is an interesting quote to take into context as we go into this. Yeah.
As you'll see. It was when I first heard that quote, when we brought it up before, it was a different... I pictured something different, as you'll find out.
Yes.
And then in the Harvard Crimson on October 3rd, 97, Stone said, "It would be a combination of action, suspense, and philosophy for the 21st century, a very cutting-edge film." And you will see how cutting-edge as we begin to talk about this.
Yes.
So the script begins, I have to say, looking at this script and everything about it, I was reading the first half, and I think I was texting you while I was reading this and freaking out because the first half of the script is fantastic. And the first act in particular is fantastic. And I was the whole opening sequence is there's sort of this dictator guy in a Brazilian rainforest, I think is what it is. He's burning down the rainforest, and he's just a bad guy. I think he's a drug dealer too or something. And they sort of very briefly set up this guy. So he's like celebrating some bad deeds that he's doing or whatever. And he's got these gaggle of prostitutes at this party, and he brings a prostitute back into his back room. And this prostitute puts on lipstick and then kisses him, and then he goes into cardiac arrest. And you realize the prostitute pulls this like seal off of her lips, and you realize that the lipstick she put on was some kind of poison, and that she's an IMF agent, and that he's going into cardiac arrest now. And the paramedics come, and Ethan Hunt's one of the paramedics, and they bring him out, and they like take him out of this party, and they bring him to an airstrip, and they bring him onto this plane, and it looks like a normal plane. He gets on the plane, they take off, and they go into the skies, and there's a storm, and they're trying to bring him back to life, and he's barely alive, and he thinks he's having a heart attack. And then suddenly, like, there's a flicker in the window outside in this thunderstorm, and the engines like go out, and you think, oh my God, they're gonna crash. And there's a flicker in the window that looks a little unnatural, and then Cruise goes into the cockpit and goes down to this special thing and like adjusts something and comes back in, and you realize they've never left the ground. They're in this airplane, and it's like a specialty airplane that has these HD monitors set up in the windows to trick him. It's a mousetrap, just like in Fallout in the hospital room. And they've tricked him into thinking that he's going to crash. And so he goes back in the plane. The airplane is going to crash, and they're like going down. As they're going down, this dictator starts to confess. Like that people are freaking out around him, and everybody's like, I don't want to die, oh my God. And this dictator's like, oh, I'm fine with dying. I've done all these great things, and I'm happy with it. Do you want to hear all the things I've done? And he starts listing. So he lists some of his crimes. They get a recording of it, and that's how they nab him. It's pretty awesome. And I'm probably not really doing it justice.
So that's a cold open. Yeah. There's no sort of connection.
And they don't really say where the title sequence is.
Okay.
But I assume it's probably right after that.
Yeah.
They get the information from him, and then oxygen masks drop from the ceiling as they're about to crash, and then all the IMF agents put on the masks, but he doesn't. He gets gassed. He passes out, and then they leave him, and they get the recording, and then they win.
That's great.
It's a really cool opening.
Yeah.
Like, would have been so fun.
They can still do it.
Yeah, maybe they will.
Yeah.
And then after that, they set up this bad guy in a very brief opening that you don't really know what it is. It's like this weird room that's like a dentist chair in the middle, and it's like some kind of complex technology. So it's a little weird, and it'll come back later in a way that, anyway, it doesn't matter. So then after that, Ethan's on vacation.
Oh.
And it's like, so this is clearly an idea that Tom Cruise wanted to have in MI2, is the idea of Ethan on vacation.
Right.
But instead of rock climbing for his vacation, he's sailing.
Oh.
And
did that speak to you?
I did grow up sailing.
Yeah.
So I was happy to see it, hopefully, maybe. Although it was in Casino Royale. So maybe that's why they wanted to avoid it.
Right.
Or this is before Casino Royale.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
So maybe it made its way over to Casino Royale. So, yeah, he's on vacation. He sees a Newsweek headline that talks about that dictator going down. So it's like hints that they took care of that. And then and then the sunglasses. So there's like a cabana boy who comes. He goes to this resort, and this cabana boy comes over to him and says, "Oh, you dropped your sunglasses." And Ethan's like, "I didn't drop my sunglasses." And he's like, "You dropped your sunglasses."
Wow, well that goes back to the old show too, where there would be a different person.
There'd be a person, and they have code.
Yeah.
So so the sunglasses though it was a Ray, and it's listed in the script as Ray-Ban sunglasses.
But I think Oakley's in Mission Impossible too.
Oh, are they?
I think they are.
Well, so I either way, I think it's written into the script, whatever it is.
That it's Ray-Bans.
That it's or whatever maybe I'm remembering it wrong, but whatever it was, I think they probably had their deal in place.
Yeah.
Is my guess.
Or the Ray-Bans could have been a reference to Top Gun and Risky Business.
Oh.
Because
is that what he has, Ray-Bans?
He had the kind of classic Ray-Bans and Risky Business.
Oh, are those Ray-Bans in there?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So he gets the sunglasses, gets his mission briefing, but it's not by Kittridge. It's not by but it's not by Swanbeck. It's by this character named Man, M-A-N-N, and the man gives him his mission. He's got to rescue this theoretical mathematician whose health is failing, and he's in this hellhole of a prison in China, and he's got to go save him. So his name is Ling. So, Ethan, knocks the sunglasses off the table when they're supposed to self-destruct, and there's like this slow motion moment where the sunglasses go down and they blow up, but he makes it seem like he makes it seem like he knocked the sunglasses off, and when they hit the ground, they broke.
Oh, that's cute.
He times it so that they self-destruct right when they hit the ground. So it looks like they just broke like normal sunglasses breaking.
That's pretty cool.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So then Ethan he gets a Chinese IMF team. They're going over prison plans, and they bring up Ethan's got a photographic memory.
Wow.
Which doesn't come into the series really until Rogue Nation.
Yes,
right?
that's
In Rogue
true.
Nation, he memorizes all the money accounts or whatever that Solomon Lane needs at the end of and that's so. But this photographic memory idea with Ethan Hunt's been around since '98. So and then also he the Chinese team members are talking in Chinese, and then of course Ethan steps in and speaks. They think they're able to speak without him understanding, but he actually speaks fluent Chinese.
Of course.
And so it's. I think one of them even comments, "You speak beautiful Chinese."
So this team does not have Luther or any.
This team at the beginning does not.
Okay.
But they have a new love interest named Sarah Chen, I think is her name.
Okay.
And, so there's like a sort of a new love interest introduced here.
Okay.
And so they have to break this guy out of prison. So they do this great scheme where they crash into the warden's car, and he on purpose, and then he yells at them. And when he's yelling at them, they record his voice. And then when they record his voice, they use it to create a voice chip.
Right.
And they have the same voice chip technology that ends up in MI2. Remember, it's not in the first movie, but in the second movie, they tape a little device to their neck. So that's
interesting. The cold open of MI2 when Ambrose takes off the chip.
Right.
Yeah.
But they never explain. They never show them record anybody's voice or anything.
Right.
They just pull the strip off. In this one, you see them record this guy's voice, and then they say, "All right, we're gonna have this. This is a voice chip. And he puts it on there." And
right.
So
but he doesn't have to.
But it's not like an MI3 where he forces Philip Seymour Hoffman to read that poem or it's not as involved with that. They can just record his voice and then
that's awesome.
Yeah,
I'm very into that.
Yeah, it's cool.
It's just crazy to see these ideas.
I know they're bouncing around way back then, and then they sort of trickle in through the series.
It's so great.
So then they did this big prison escape set piece, and there's actually a mirror mylar in a hallway that they use. They call it a mirror mylar, and it's very reminiscent of the Ghost Protocol.
Right. Scene with Benji. Right.
With Benji. And they put a mirror mylar in this hallway, and then they go on the other side of it, and then it looks like no one's in there. So even that idea
that's interesting.
Is sort of bouncing around, which is also as we talked about, I think our Ghost Protocol episode, or maybe we talked about it in one of our old show episodes, but it was in the old show where they did a screen, like a projection screen to fool a prison guard. So yeah, they have this big set piece, and they break out Ling and tricking. And there's a whole thing where Ethan is pretending to be the warden, and they have an IMF agent seducing the warden elsewhere to keep him at bay. And they put something in his drink so that he's impotent. So he's like trying to. The IMF agent doesn't have to actually sleep with him. He like can't.
That's
get
really
it up,
interesting.
So it's pretty fun.
Yeah.
And then of course he gets mad and then leaves and then ends up coming to the prison while they're doing the prison escape, and then Ethan has to pull off his mask, and then they actually end up putting an Ethan mask on the warden to make the bad guys think that he's Ethan, and then they shoot him dead. It's got the mask crazies a little bit.
Wait, who are the bad guys?
Well, the guards of the prison.
The guards, okay.
Yeah. They're trying to get out of this prison, and
that's intense.
And yeah.
Yikes.
And so it's a lot of mask play.
Okay.
So then they escape, and there's also like a mention of while they're escaping, they drive through a hillside shanty town, which is very reminiscent of Police Story.
Yes, and later appropriated by Michael Bay for Bad Boys 2.
But Police Story, which is coming out on Criterion soon, which I'm very excited about.
Yeah.
It's one of Jackie Chan's, if not Jackie Chan's best movie. And there's the whole opening sequence of that movie is him driving down this hill through this shanty town, all these cars destroyed in this town. It's amazing. It's a crazy sequence. And they kind of almost sounds like they were going to do something like that in this, with Ethan driving through this shanty town. He gets away with Ling, and then he delivers Ling to some guy named Coburn who supposedly works for IMF. And then
they go over into Vietnam.
Yes,
Right.
they escape into Vietnam.
Right.
And then Coburn is this guy who supposedly works for IMF, and he gets Ling, and Ethan isn't quite sure if he trusts him. And then there's a sequence where Ethan can kind of see into the hotel room where Ling and Coburn are, and there's that dentist chair. It's back. And Ling sees this dentist chair, and as soon as he sees it, he goes to the window, and he actually can see Ethan Hunt, and he yells out to Ethan Hunt, "You lied to me," and then he commits suicide.
Holy shit.
Yeah, it's crazy.
That's really intense.
But Ethan has no idea what's going on, and then he escapes and runs away. So then he goes to IMF headquarters in Rome, which is new. We've never had IMF headquarters in Rome, and that character Man exits at the end of a day, his work day, and he's walking home, and he goes through this. They say it's like a section of town that has a lot of neon signs, and as he's walking, he sees a couple of he sees a sign and the letters get knocked out, and then he only sees the letter I, and then he keeps walking and then he sees another sign and the letters get knocked out, and then it goes AM, so it's I am, and then he goes to another sign and then they reveal it's Ethan, and he's like in hiding, walking along, and he's got a gun with a silencer, and he's shooting out these neon signs to create this message. And then the next sign he gets to, and it's a really long sign, and it says, he knocks out the letters, so it says here, so that it's I am here. And then Man, now he goes into a square. This is a square or someplace that, there are a whole bunch of electric signs, and there's one huge sign, and Ethan knocks out all the letters so that it says, "Meet me, 77 AD."
Okay.
And it's a pretty cool sequence.
Yeah.
Kind of fun. I mean, it's maybe a little bit of a stretch that you could find all those letters, but pretty cool.
Part of Rome that's real. There's a lot of neon. So, yeah.
So the 77 AD reference is like they go to the catacombs, and there's a thing there from 77 AD, and that's where they meet. So then they're talking, and there's this great reveal. This is all the first act still.
Yeah.
It's the end of the first act. And Ethan's telling him everything that happened, and Man's like, well, there's something about this doesn't quite make sense. And Ethan's like, what's that? And he's like, there was no mission.
Right.
So he was hijacked. Sort of like how in Rogue Nation, the message was hijacked by the Syndicate. Right.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So yeah, and they're like, they get spotted by a drone that's like watching them.
Oh, wow.
And then I think they set fire to some garbage to create a smoke cover, so they can go hide. And the drone is like, it starts shooting at them. And the drone actually kills Man.
Oh.
So his boss, who was like a good guy, he wasn't on the run from the IMF.
No.
He was actually had a good relationship with this guy. He gets killed. And then Ethan's off trying to figure out what's going on. And that's basically the end of the first act there. And I think as Man is dying, he has some dying words. Because it seems like Man knows something that Ethan doesn't know. For whatever reason, he doesn't tell him. And he says something about it's all in the mind or something like that. And so Ethan heads off, and he's on his adventure. He goes back to IMF headquarters, and he can't find anything about Ling or Coburn on the computer systems. And he decides they destroy everything at the IMF, destroy the computers. There's like a montage of him destroying hard drives and all this stuff. It was pretty crazy.
That is crazy.
We haven't really seen that. I mean, we've seen them on the run with only, in Ghost Protocol, they only have what's on this train.
Right.
But the idea of going to IMF headquarters and smashing things. Yeah. It's also weird to me that IMF headquarters is in Rome.
Yes.
Why did they do
that? Yeah. It seems to be that in the last couple of movies, it's kind of been established. It's sort of it's an offshoot of regular sort of governmental agencies. So you would think that they would just be in Washington, D.C.
Right.
Or in Langley,
Right.
Yeah.
It is in Langley, in the first movie.
Yeah.
But we've talked about this too, Mission Commander Swanbeck. Why is he British?
Exactly.
Anthony Hopkins is British, and he's the new boss.
I'm sure there are IMF field agents, outposts.
Right.
But it's weird to think that is the headquarters is in Rome.
Right.
Yeah.
And Jonathan Rhys-Meyers in the third one has he's Irish,
he's
right? His Irish
yeah.
accent.
Maggie Q, clearly.
Yeah. So they're all American citizens who are...
Simon Pegg.
I guess the CIA probably has their offshoots in different countries.
Yeah. That's really weird and interesting. But you can, just from your description of these scenes, it feels like Marconi was writing for Oliver Stone in a way. We'll put a scene in Vietnam. We'll put, that it was sort of being catered to him a little bit.
Yes.
But that's a really interesting opening to the
Yes.
movie. I mean, what did you think?
That to me was the best. This whole first act, I wish I could have seen this movie.
Yeah.
It's so cool, and it's like really great spy thriller. And
Yeah.
so much great, I don't know, so much like the old show.
Yeah.
I mean, I was super excited.
So where does...
So then from here, Ethan, I think he collects his team, and this is a weird thing. He goes and he recruits Luther, and Luther is robbing a Brinks truck.
Interesting.
So Luther, I guess, went back to being disavowed and back into crime, and Ethan like interrupts this this Brinks truck robbery, and Luther's very happy to leave behind these guys and just go with Ethan.
He was like with a team of guys.
He's with a team of guys, and he is happy to just go with Ethan. So Ethan and Luther then go back to China, and they find the people on the team from the Chinese IMF team that he had in the first mission, and they're all dead. So then, it sort of went into outline form at this point, I think, in the script, and it was kind of like, yeah, then this happened, they went there, everybody's dead, and then Ethan and Luther go to the only person who can help them, Max.
Wow.
So they go back and meet with Vanessa Redgrave's character, Max, who, as we've heard, they've tried to keep bringing back into the series. They've tried to bring her back in Ghost Protocol, and they only had a little nod to her henchman in Ghost Protocol.
Right.
But they actually have a sit-down in a cafe, and they have Max talk about everything that's been going on, and they assume she's involved. Luther's got a laptop that kind of is reading her whether or not it's a lie, like she's lying. It's sort of like a high-tech lie detector through Luther's laptop, and she's telling the truth.
In the Chinese team, though, is the love interest dead, too?
So when he was escaping from the prison, he thought she might have gotten shot, and he wasn't sure what happened to her.
Okay.
So she's gone, and he's not sure if she survived.
So when they go back to get their team,
don't
she's
worry,
not there.
She'll be back.
Okay. All right. Good.
So they're talking to Max, and she gives them a bunch of information, and there's some nice dialogue with her, and that's kind of a fun scene. And she starts talking about this theoretical supercomputer that can basically trace everything you've ever done through credit cards and all this stuff. And like basically, unless you live your life only spending cash, then you can be traced.
Oh, brother.
Which is seems like very Oliver Stone conspiracy theory type stuff.
But also just very like, oh, this was written in 1998. Like, the millennium is approaching, that kind of stuff. Yeah. Yes.
My criticism in this, where the script goes more and more to me, and the reason why that didn't work, and probably why Cruise realized it, and I think this is what McCory and Cruise have realized, is how old school these movies are. They're classical.
Yeah.
They don't get too involved in the technology, plot-wise. Yes. Obviously, they have gadgets and things.
Yeah.
But they're trying to make them more timeless.
Yeah.
And this movie that would not have been timeless. It would have been very much of its time.
Okay.
Anyway, so they, Ethan and Luther, they track down the bad guy.
This is the bad guy from the chair.
From the chair. They did a very brief scene of him at the beginning where he had this room and a dentist chair, and he was doing some kind of weird, it's almost like a Brazil type thing, or
like a
Cronenbergian, almost like, I don't know, Lawnmower Man or something.
Oh, okay, all right.
Like they've got like you strap in and then they can read your mind. Type thing.
So who's the guy?
So this guy is, I think his name was William Thayer.
Okay.
But they described him as a combination of Bill Gates and Ted Kaczynski, which is also interesting because Ted Kaczynski was a model for Joe Carnahan's bad guy in MI3.
Oh, interesting.
So I wonder if this is like a thing that Cruise...
The Kenneth Branagh character.
Yeah. Yes, Kenneth Branagh in what would have been Joe Carnahan's MI3 was described as a Ted Kaczynski type. So this is like a villain that's also been kind of toyed around with a few times in the series, but never came to be.
And the Prison Break, obviously, there's a Prison Break that opens Ghost Protocol.
Yes.
So it's just really interesting to see all these kind of parts that have been reshaped for later movies. Okay.
So, they introduce this character, and Luther and Ethan are tracking him down, and now Sarah Chen is alive.
Okay.
That was the love interest.
Yeah.
She's with William Thayer in his facility, and she's strapped up into the brain machine, and he's reading her memories and looking at... Because in the prison escape, there was something written on the wall that Ling had written on the wall that was like the important information that he needs to complete this device.
Okay.
This supercomputer
that Thayer
device.
Needs,
yes,
okay.
And Ling and Thayer used to work together, and now they've had a falling out. So he needs this information that was drawn on the wall in the prison cell.
So Thayer set up this mission to get him out.
Yes,
Okay.
and he gets Sarah Chen, but Sarah Chen, it turns out, didn't ever look at the wall, and Ethan was in the way.
Interesting.
So then like, you know, Ethan breaks in, and like they let him break in, and then you realize Thayer needed Ethan all along because Ethan's the one who saw the drawing on the wall.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. They also, along the way, Ethan and Luther, this is really weird and meta. Also weird because ILM has had a relationship with this franchise. Digital Domain, is Digital Domain still around?
It's still around. Yeah, I think it was once owned by James Cameron and Stan Winston.
Yeah. So
I'm not sure if they're still involved. But.
Right, and that's a visual effects company.
Yeah.
That is in this movie. They actually go to Digital Domain. Ethan and Luther go to Digital Domain and recruit a CGI engineer.
Okay.
To help them with the mission.
So he's like a team member.
It's a she, Allison.
Okay.
Allison, I think it was Curzon.
Okay.
She's a CGI programmer. And she's, you know, they go into Digital Domain and she's getting yelled at by some bearded director. And then they
Who do we think that is? Steven Spielberg? Who do we think?
It could have been De Palma.
It could have been De Palma, yeah. This is also probably the Michael Tolkin of it. He wrote the player.
The player,
yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
So they recruit Allison to help them in their scheme of what they're going to do. Then they end up going to the William Thayer's lair, and Ethan gets captured. And, oh my gosh, I forgot. There's actually, even before Ethan gets captured, there's this epic action sequence at an airport in Denver.
Okay.
Where all the electronics get messed up and the air traffic control gets all messed up.
Oh, that's kind of fun.
And it's like they mess everything up, and Ethan has to stage his own death, and it's crazy.
What? That is nuts.
It's like they have to like trick the computer because the computer is like always 2 steps ahead of them. It's very it gets a little.
Oh, because the computer is
doing all
tracking.
This, yes,
okay.
And so it's like it's a lot.
Okay.
And so, you know, when McCory was talking about how you can't have, it's better to not have exposition during action sequences.
Yes.
There is a lot of exposition during this action sequence.
About the computer.
About the computer. Ethan starts telling a story about Jonah. And then explaining this story to this is while all this mayhem is going on around them.
The biblical story.
They even mentioned the idea. They said again in an outline form, like maybe an airplane crashes in the background of this.
Oh my god!
It's crazy. And then, he talks about Jonah, and then that's what gives him the idea to fake his own death and make the computer think that he's dead. So he like takes this airplane out on the tarmac or whatever and crashes it, but escapes before he crashes it. But it looks like on camera that he's dead. It's very convoluted.
Yeah, that's too much. That's too much.
Yes. So, sorry I'm so all over the place, but...
It sounds like the script was all over the place. Yeah, okay.
So then Ethan is breaking into William Thayer's facility. This is the point where Thayer then realize needs Ethan.
Okay.
And needs to tap into his brain. And now this is like the whole second half of the script where he's got Ethan in this dentist chair reading his memories, trying to get at that. He's trying to make Ethan relive this moment of going through the prison and looking at the wall. And Ethan keeps fighting it with his mind. It's like sort of reminding me of Brazil. There's this whole part where Ethan wakes up, he wakes up in a white room and he's locked in, and there's a surveillance camera mounted high in a corner, and like they feed him food, and then when the food comes, there's a gun and a knife in it and a note from Luther that says like, we're here, we're close.
Oh, that's cool.
So they're gonna break him out, right? Then they like go through this whole thing where he takes the knife and he goes back into the dentist chair and he's there like reading his mind. He like cuts his hand. He said he cuts his own hand so that he can remain conscious, I guess, because of the pain or something.
Yeah.
Again, like the rules are not explained.
Can you talk about what this machine is called too?
I think it was funny because in the script they mentioned it. They would say what it was, and they would say, or it could be this, or it could be this. So I think one of them was the linear consciousness accelerator.
Okay.
Mind-body transfer station, I think was another one, and the evolution room.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah. I think they were still trying to figure out exactly what they were doing, which is maybe why Oliver Stone ultimately decided to move on, because they just couldn't crack how to make this all work.
Right.
But anyway, back to the escape. Yeah. Ethan is cutting his own hand, And while Thayer is trying to make him relive the prison escape and look at the prison wall, he like bends the reality and gets out because he's cut himself, I guess. And he's got a gun. They get out. Luther's there, and like they break him out of. They like break open a wall or something, and he gets onto a helicopter with Luther and Allison, and he's flying away. Allison gets shot, and they're like shooting at Ethan and shooting at him as they're like maybe gonna crash. Luther's talking to Ethan and asking him about the information that Thayer needs, and then Ethan starts to realize, oh wait a second.
He's still
this isn't real, is
yeah.
it? He puts his hand out of the helicopter and like reaches, and then as bullets are coming at him, the bullets don't hit his hand. They like move around his hand so that he doesn't get hit.
Okay.
And then he shoots Luther, and they crash because he realizes this was all just a simulation that was to try to trick him into giving the information.
Okay. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
I mean, this
is getting into pretty big sci-fi.
Yeah.
For Mission Impossible. I mean, you look at the series now, it's kind of nuts.
Yeah, there would be no place for that. I mean, do they go into any, like, his memories that give us any background on the Ethan or anything like that?
So, well, then after that, the Thayer's frustrated or whatever,
yeah.
and Ethan goes back to his cell, and then it kind of goes back, I think it goes back into outline form again, and then there's a whole nother, like, legitimate escape, where Luther and Allison come in and help him escape, and he gets out. They did not figure out how to make this work because they kept describing different possible climaxes. Maybe they trick the computer into killing Thayer, or maybe if you need Ethan to fight Thayer, then maybe they neutralize the computer so that Ethan can have a showdown with Thayer. There's a lot. There's a lot still to be figured out.
Do they ever talk about what Allison is actually needed for?
Yeah. So when they trick what they end up doing the scheme to trick the computer, they film Ethan having a one-sided conversation with no one, and then she uses her CGI to create a conversation with Thayer, and then they put this as a video in front of the computer to make in front of a security camera, I guess, to make the computer think that Thayer wants to get rid of the computer, that Thayer's like disappointed with the computer, that it's not working, and that he's gonna have to shut it down.
And so that's when the computer kills Thayer.
Yeah, so that's like, and
that is hilarious.
It's like a lot of crazy ideas, and it's never really like fully answered because a lot of it is like or in the outline form, and it's so
I'm kind of into that idea though. Like I like the computer being sort of having that personality, like being disappointed.
Right.
Yeah.
But then Ethan's getting away. He escapes with Luther. He gets back, and he's like totally destroyed. That he's in a wheelchair in like a country rest home, and he's recovering. And his mother and uncle come to see him.
Oh wow!
And Luther and Allison are there, and then his mother and uncle are like talking to him. I think they go down to like a dock and talk. Ethan's mom tells him, "You may never walk again," and they're really sad. And then they're talking, and they're saying, you could come work on the farm. And Ethan's like, well, if I never walk in, how am I going to work on the farm? And they're like, oh, there's so much technology now that you can just push buttons, and there's tractors you can work with when you're paralyzed or whatever. And then they're still talking with him, and Ethan starts to realize they're trying to get that information about what's on the wall in the prison.
Oh my god!
And that it's all in his head again.
That's too much.
Yes, it's too much.
Yeah.
And he realizes it. So then, as he realizes it, he, uses his brain to mess it up, and like it tears the fabric of the universe apart. He ends up in the Garden of Eden.
What?
They call it the Palace of Memory, and it's the Garden of Eden. And so Ethan sees, and they call him like a child of the new millennium, who is Asian/Latin/African/European, and talks to this child, and the child is asking him how he knew, and Ethan says, they named the uncle. They say his name is Uncle Donald. And I can't remember from the first movie if they ever said his name, the uncle's name.
Yes, yeah, they did.
Okay.
Ma and Uncle Donald, shipping
was
Ma and
Was it Uncle Donald?
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Because he says, Ethan's, the way he knew it was fake, is he says, there is no Uncle Donald.
Interesting.
Yeah, he says, like, my file is filled with misinformation.
Huh.
And so he's like, as soon as I saw Uncle Donald there, I knew it was not true.
Right.
But it makes me wonder if...
I thought it was Uncle Donald.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know it was the mom and the uncle. I just couldn't remember if Donald was in the first movie.
I thought that
we
was
had to
him.
look that up, but... yeah, so then the kid that he's talking to in the Garden of Eden turns into an old man and tries to beat him with a stick. And then Ethan... I mean, it's unfair of me to talk about this without someone reading it in context. Because some people might like it a lot more than me, but to me, the second half really went off the rails.
Right.
And it sounds like there was just a lot of different ideas for this that were coming from different places, and they probably just couldn't all get on the same page.
Well, I mean, okay.
And the fact that so much of it ended up in outline form in the second half, I think speaks to how they probably just couldn't get all on the same page.
Okay, so you need to finish the scene.
Okay, so sorry. So the the old man tries to beat up Ethan, and Ethan takes the stick and he's about to beat him, and then the old man turns into a child, and then Ethan says like, "I know who you are. The game is up," or something, and then as he's about to beat the boy, I think, or he's about to beat the old man, it turns into a boy, and then the boy turns into a monster.
Okay.
Which they don't really describe what the monster looks like.
I'm very into that, yeah.
But I'm very curious to see what a monster would be. I mean, you look at where the MI series is now.
Yeah.
And the idea of a monster in it is completely ludicrous.
It's crazy, yeah.
But then Ethan says to the monster, "I know who you are." And then it turns out that it was Ling all along.
The guy who
who supposedly committed suicide.
Yeah.
And I didn't quite understand if it was Ling uploaded his consciousness into the computer, maybe, or if.
So was he
So he was the bad guy all along. I guess
he was like the artificial intelligence.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. It was confusing. And then at the end, so Ethan's realized it, so he's back in the consciousness accelerator evolution room thing, and he actually breaks up. They disconnect everything, and because I think like the computer had access to nuclear reactors that it could blow up, it could start nuclear war or something. So they had to disconnect those, and again, a lot of this is in outline form, so it's not fully scripted.
So is the computer being shut down by like Luther? Or is Ethan willing it?
I think Ethan outsmarting it broke it down.
All right.
So I mean, it's a lot to take in.
Yeah.
And then they Ethan and Luther and Allison go back to the headquarters in Rome, and they set up IMF again. I think there's something on the TV about like there was a lightning fire at an army base to try to as a cover, like the world will never know how close it came to this huge disaster in typical form for the IMF.
So what happened to the Chinese love interest?
I don't remember.
Okay,
that's a great question. I think she might have sacrificed herself.
Well, I mean,
at some point,
it's just interesting because how much of a romance the second one ended up being.
Yes,
and that's sort of
sidelined. It wasn't really.
Yes, this version was not. Well, that sounds insane. Yeah, I don't know. I don't see how that would have worked. I mean, budgetarily, it sounds like it was a $500 million movie for that time too.
That might have been also the problem.
Yeah.
They came to.
But it's just interesting. Like Ethan, like we've heard all these stories about how Tom Cruise didn't want to be lying down in the last scene of Fallout. So to think about him being like physically incapacitated for at least a third of the movie is like insane.
Yeah,
to me.
I mean it's a lot of the movie where he's just in this chair.
Yeah.
And then it's all just kind of fake, where it's like simulations in his brain of him escaping. And it's just not. It doesn't feel like Mission Impossible.
Yeah.
Like I said, the first act is so cool, and I was loving it. And then suddenly it just like started to get a little weirder and a little weirder, and then it was just like this just doesn't feel like Mission Impossible.
No. It feels like Lucy or Inception or something, but no.
Right.
Yeah.
Which I love Lucy. Actually.
Yeah.
I always like saying I love Lucy. But that movie Lucy that Luc Besson directed with Scarlett Johansson is awesome.
Yeah, it's a great movie.
It's ridiculous and so fun.
Yeah.
And not Mission Impossible.
No, not at all.
But so then at that point, the script was rejected by Stone. Somebody, both either Cruise or Stone. And Oliver Stone left, and then Cruise met with Wong Kar-wai, and then met with John Woo, and hired John Woo, and then Ron Moore was on for a while, and then at a certain point, Robert Towne took over But I have to say also, I was taking peeks at Ron Moore and Brandon Braga's drafts.
Yes.
And in their earlier drafts, which again, from the start, their drafts are pretty similar structurally to the final MI2.
Right.
There's the opening with Ambrose on the plane, and there's the opening with the guy injecting himself with the virus. That was all in there.
I thought what was cool about their draft, though, or it was their draft, or was it the town draft that had the numbers on the inside of the plane? Like it was like a screen, like the interior of the plane was a screen, and there were numbers on the screen, sort of counting down to his death. Maybe that was the Robert Town version.
Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
Wait, what? Did I text you about this?
Maybe I probably just found the Robert Town draft somewhere. But I was wondering if that was an element.
That might have been. I didn't look that closely.
Okay.
I was spent one day there.
Yeah.
So I read the Marconi draft with Tolkin revisions, and then I just skimmed through notes of Ron Moore's and skimmed through the drafts.
Okay.
And something I noticed in the early drafts, which is very interesting, is the team that they give Ethan. And it's the same thing, the mountain climbing scene. He gets the sunglasses with the mission, and then in the mission, they say your team is waiting for you, and one of them is Luther. Mm-hmm. Another one, and then also, or the early version of Naya, the Tandy Newton character, her name was Gabriella.
Okay.
She was an IMF agent.
Oh.
And they said, they were toying with the idea of whether or not he had a history with her, or like did they have a romance before and they're coming back together, or not, and they were going back and forth on that. But she was an IMF agent for the first few drafts, it seems like, for Ron Moore. But the big surprise is the other team member was Willie Armitage from the original show.
Oh.
The Peter Lupus character.
That's really cool.
Yeah. And, I think they describe him, I think, as like a big guy.
Yeah.
Just like Peter Lupus. And he's, I think they said mid-30s. So I don't know who they were thinking of casting, if anybody. But at one point, Willie was going to be back in this series.
That's really cool. It's also weird that they only got story credit, considering how close.
Yes.
But
I think it's just this. Yeah, I mean, I'd have to read it. Like again, I didn't read the script that closely, but I was just sort of skimming through it, and I was like, oh, these are all the kind of basic beats of
the eventual
of what MI2 was,
right?
Which is, I think, why they justifiably got their story credit.
And you found some cool things in the notes too.
Did I?
Well, you found.
What did I say? I can't remember. What else did I tell you about?
There was a reference to a prison break sequence from a David Kep version of the original movie.
So I think they sent Ron Moore a piece of the David Kep draft of the first movie, and
so this
is from December 12th, 1994. This is the David Kep draft of the first Mission Impossible, and I think they were talking about maybe doing some kind of prison break sequence like this. So they gave him this, just gave him a few pages of the Kep script, and that was in this Ron Moore collection. I just read it, and it's just a sequence where Ethan recruits Luther. So this is like the Luther introduction, which in the final movie, the first movie, Luther's just there on the train.
On the channel, yeah.
Luther and Krieger are just there. There's no real introduction other than they're just giving them the briefing for how to break into Langley. But in this draft by Kep, he like goes and recruits Luther, and I think in the early draft it seemed like Luther, I think he was like he was kind of like a guy who got things. He was like an
arms dealer.
He had arms stuff. He could get you equipment. Which seems like Krieger was more that guy.
Yeah.
In the final script, because he's like, he says something about like, I need to get all this stuff, and Krieger's like, I can get it next week or whatever. And he's like, that's not what I heard. You can do better than that or whatever. So I think for whatever reason they switched it and gave that to Krieger.
Okay.
But initially it was Luther, and then with Ethan and Luther they go recruit this other guy named Mitnick, and Mitnick was the computer expert.
Okay.
And Mitnick actually has the dialogue that Luther has about the top of the line crypto thinking machine laptops, like that whole that line verbatim is in the Kep draft for this other character Mitnick, who must have gotten cut out. They decided to simplify and make it fewer characters. But anyway, they get Luther. Ethan gets Luther. He gets Mitnick. So Ethan, Luther, Mitnick, and Claire go break Krieger out of prison.
Okay.
And that's how they get Krieger. So the Jean Reno character Krieger is broken out of prison, and it's like this impenetrable prison in Bombay.
Okay.
And Claire goes in there pretending to be Krieger's wife, and I think she has like a lipstick thing. She puts on lipstick, and she like uses it as a dart gun, blow dart, like shoots him in the neck, and then Krieger is dead. quote unquote dead.
Right.
And then they have to pull him out of the prison. That's because I think
Because he's about to be incinerated.
Yeah. Like I think Krieger makes some comment like the only way I can get out of this prison is if I'm in a box. And then I think some line like Claire's like, "Oh, that's the idea," and then she shoots him with the dart, and then he's dead. And then they pull him out in a box, and he's about to get incinerated. I think Ethan Hunt is the cremation specialist, and then they're gonna like cremate him, and then they just break him out, and that's how they get Krieger. So there was like a whole section of the first movie that never got made, where they actually go and get these people,
right?
Which is sort of like a Magnificent Seven type recruiting sequence.
I'm sure De Palma was just like, no, we just need to cut to the chase. And I mean, they haven't ever really done something like that, going out and getting new team members. So that would have been an interesting thing to see, but it does not feel very much like the first movie.
Oh, and another thing that was in the early Ron Moore drafts, Kittridge.
Oh, okay.
The sunglasses message was not from Swanbeck, and it was not from Mann.
Yeah.
It was from Kittridge. So there was for a while talk of Kittridge being in it, and there were even some story notes about maybe Kittridge is in on it with Brendan Gleeson's character in MI2.
Okay.
Because I think doesn't he like to own a company or something that's like for the part of the virus, and so I think there was talk of having Kittridge back in at some point, not in the Oliver Stone version, but in the John Woo version.
Okay.
So that was interesting.
I'm very into that.
And then at a certain point in the drafts, they stopped using Kittridge, and then they replaced it with another character's name that was not Swanbeck. It was Richard Wellner.
Okay.
So that was another boss possible guy.
If only.
And at a certain point, and again, like with Gabriella, who was the early version of Naya, they at one point the script was you'll have to convince her to rejoin the IMF.
That's interesting. So it seems less emphasis on her sexual history and more on her spy craft.
Right. But I think it was always in there.
Okay.
Because in the whole, that's the thing we don't love about MI2.
Yes.
Is that I loved the idea of them bringing her back for her skills, but instead they're like, oh no, it's actually because she has a past relationship with Ambrose. And they always say in the mission briefing, even in these earlier drafts with Ron Moore and Brown and Braga, they say you'll get more information later. So
kicking it down the road.
Yeah, which is like basically just for the plot to work.
My favorite note from Paula Wagner that you wrote down was Luther is a clone ? Root it in reality.
I don't know about that. If that was, that's completely out of context, so I have no idea. But that was a note, I guess, from a phone conversation with Paula Wagner that Ron Moore wrote down.
Sure.
I don't know. I guess it was because I think that was probably early days when they were still doing the crazy tech stuff.
Yeah.
I can't imagine they would ever have Luther be a clone. Maybe it was in reference to the earlier versions that were getting too techy.
Okay.
And she was saying like we can't have that because it needs to be more grounded.
Okay.
I don't know.
Well,
I mean, there's a lot there. Sorry.
That's a lot to process.
I know. Sorry. I hope I wasn't too all over the place. But
no, I mean, I'm glad.
It was eye-opening to go there and look at this work. And it's amazing archive that Ron Moore has there that we have to obviously credit.
Yeah, of course. I mean,
the Ron Moore collection, which is really cool.
That's great.
And we're back. We're back, Charles.
Good stuff. Crazy.
Good stuff.
AI, computer, devil business.
Just your typical Mission Impossible movie, really.
I mean, this would have blown up the franchise in a totally different way.
Yeah.
I mean, and if it bombed, would that be the end? Because, I mean, MI2 is still, by some measures, the biggest success box office-wise, right?
Correct.
The final version of it. But this version,
Yes.
I don't think would have been.
No. Yeah, I don't know. It's pretty... It's pretty tantalizing, but yeah, I mean, obviously Cruise knew at least what box these movies should sort of be in, and I think that obviously the first 5 movies have a lot of distinct personality to them, but this would have been just completely outside of the wheelhouse.
Yeah,
But,
it's pretty crazy because it's like some people who think that the John Woo Mission Impossible is a huge left turn, like this would have been a much bigger one.
Yeah, this would have been. Yeah, it's just fascinating to think about. So thank you, Charles, for uncovering this amazing discovery.
Yeah, and speaking of which, we haven't done the episode yet, but we will be doing an episode probably in the lead up to the 200th. We're going to do an episode about Robert Towne's draft of the first Mission Impossible, and that we're going to do a similar kind of deep dive into that. We just haven't had the time to get through that yet, but we will be doing that soon.
We will be doing it soon. I don't know which version we have because I've kind of started chatting with Kep for some other things, and he said that the script was only 76 pages, but the one we have is a full 146 or something. So anyway,
I have a theory about that, but we can get into that when we get to the episode.
Okay, we can follow up with him too and see maybe if he can give us a little bit more context.
Yeah.
There. But anyway, I'm really looking forward to doing that with you, Charles. I think that's going to be really fun. And what else? You have some shout outs and you have some things to...
I do. Actually, yeah, I want to give a special thank you to Sonia Miranda and Jacob Ballard. Thank you, Sonia and Jacob. And I want to tell everybody to sign up for our Patreon, patreon.com/LightTheFuse. You can sign up for bonus content. At that level, you'll get bonus episodes every week, which is awesome. We talk about all kinds of movies. We did a recent episode about our top 5 Batman movies of all the different Batman movies over the years. There have been many. And then we also do stuff like covering, there was a recent Hollywood Reporter article all about Mission Impossible 7 and the budget and Tom Cruise's battle with the studio over when the release date, or how long the window is between theatrical and VOD and all that, when it goes to Paramount Plus, blah, blah, blah. All that stuff, we dive into it. We talk about all that stuff. Whenever there's new things, you can count on us doing an episode right away covering any of the news. And also some things about some of the crazy stunts they're doing for MI8, which look absolutely insane. So, sign up for the Patreon. There's also the higher level. We do the Zoom chats every month, and that's an awesome group of people. We have so much fun talking about Mission Impossible and movies in general. And buy something from our TeePublic store. Go to our website, LightTheFusePodcast.com. Go to the merch tab. That will take you to the TeePublic page where you can buy a shirt or a magnet or a mask or a pin or whatever you want. And then also while you're at the website, check out our episode guide and go through all the episodes. Go to this episode, check out show notes. I don't think this episode will have too many show notes, but we've had other great episodes with really awesome show notes. We did some really great ones for the cinematography miniseries recently. If you go through there, there's visual companion pieces to everything that we talked about with Adrian and Andy about the cinematography. So definitely go check that out. That's at the episode guide in our website, lightthefusepodcast.com. And what else, Drew?
Let me think. Well, I would encourage everybody to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at LightTheFusePod. And also to like, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you're listening to this podcast. It really helps us out. We are very close to 200 reviews on Apple Podcasts, so we'd love to get there. And
get in there. Yeah. Give us a rating on Apple Podcasts. A review is great too, of course, but it's just a rating. You just got to go over there and click the little star thing. Give us 4 or 5 stars,
Yeah, nothing less than 4.
Take your rating elsewhere if you're going to go less than 4.
Next week we are gonna. Who are we talking to next week, Charles?
Next week we have Ben David Grabinski.
Great, another independent filmmaker like Charles. I'm really outnumbered there in terms of independent filmmakers on the call, but he is a really great voice on Twitter as well. And
yes, yeah, he's a very talented writer director, and he has an IMF tattoo, and we're like, okay, we need to talk to you.
Yeah. So he was great. Is that a 2-parter or 1-parter?
I think it's going to be a 2-parter.
Okay, great.
Our editor was taking a look at it, and he messaged me back, and he was like, "This interview is really funny."
Oh, okay, great.
So yeah, I think you guys are in for a treat. He's really great.
Okay, awesome. Well, come back for Ben David's chat, and then we'll be easing into Light the Fuselage soon. So we got a lot of great fun stuff.
Yeah.
So lots of new stuff
as we inch our way towards our 200th episode.
Yes. So we have a lot of new fun stuff.
Yeah. Coming this summer.
A couple of weeks of retreads. That's okay. We needed it.
Yeah.
But we'll have a lot of fun stuff for everybody. So please come back.
Little palate cleanser.
Yeah. And that's it, right?
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thanks again for listening, everyone. And before we go, another mission, should you choose to accept it, please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And remember that you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at LightTheFusePod, and email us questions or comments at lightthefusepodcast@gmail.com. This message will self-destruct in 5 seconds.